My name is Erica Baccus, and I'm the author of A Promise Kept, Honoring His Wishes, Embracing Our Love. My book is a story of how I helped my husband die. My husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2020, and the story goes through from the beginning of his diagnosis to the end. He vehemently did not want to live through the end of the disease. He believed that if he had no brain, he was not a person. He would say to me, Erica, I don't have my brain. I'm not a person. There's no reason for me to be here. I don't want to live. It took me 2 years to find a way to help him not live through the end of the disease. And that meant flying to Switzerland to participate in an assisted suicide in an organization called Dignitas, because it's illegal to do it here for people with dementia. So the story travels through our journey from the beginning of his diagnosis to the day he died, but goes back and forth with flashbacks to the beginning of our love affair, our romance, our marriage, and our life that took place over 41 years. And we had what I call a magical marriage. And so there's a lot of joy and a lot of love in there. There's a lot of sadness, but it is encompassed in an atmosphere of love. It's really an important story, I believe, today, because we don't have the right to choose how we want to end our lives. And I believe that it is an important choice to make, and that we should all have the right to choose how we want to end our lives. And I think that it's important for even young people, when you're 40 or 50, to start talking to your spouse or your family or whoever it is about how you want to end your life. And I hope that people who read this book will learn that it makes sense to discuss this ahead of time, and also to think about what it means to live with a terminal disease. Is this your choice or is this not your choice? I want them to take away a couple of things. One, that life and death coexist, that life and death are just the opposite ends of the spectrum, and that we need to acknowledge that. And I want them to understand that there are options for how they live and how they die. And I also want them to understand what for better or worse means in a marriage. And I want them to get to know my husband. He was a very special man. And in order to understand the journey that we went on, you really need to get to know him. And that's why I put so much of my heart and love into telling the story of John. John is the guy that you stand in the elevator with and you're best friends when you get out. Everybody loved John. And he was the guy who had a famous laugh, and everybody knew him for his laugh. He brought joy with him wherever he went. Kids and animals were always in his lap. And he was smart, he was generous, he was kind, he was fun, and he was also very true to his convictions. So my writing journey began right after he died, after John died. I spent the better part of 3 years helping him die, doing everything that I needed to do to make sure that he could have the end that he chose. I needed to keep myself together. And after it was all over, I was a mess. When I came back from Switzerland, I had this irrational belief that I murdered my husband. I felt like, well, I should have objected. Maybe he did it because he thought I wanted him, that he was a burden and I wanted him to die, none of which was true. And so I started looking back at a few of the journals that I had written, and they brought me back to reality. And so I started to write for myself. I started to write about our experience. I started to write about what it was like to live in those days and months watching him decline. I started to write about how isolated I felt from the world. I couldn't talk to my friends because They were talking about hiking, and my head was full of John's Alzheimer's. So I was pretty isolated. So I just kept writing and writing and writing. It just came out of me. I'd never written anything before. And then one day I decided I wanted to take a writing class. And when you take a writing class that was on Zoom, you're asked to share pieces. And so I shared a few chapters, and my instructor and the other people in the class kept telling me, Erica, you have a book here. I started to believe them. And so I started to take it a little more seriously about how I was writing and the words I was using. And I found a writing coach to help me. The funniest thing was, and she's my editor now, her name is Allison. And one day her comments back to me were, Erica, this is a great place for a scene. And I emailed her back. I said, what's a scene? So that's where I started. I think the belief that I was trying to change with my book is that we have a right to choose how we die. Our laws in California say that if you have dementia, you cannot participate in our Right to Die Act because you must have 2 doctors swear an oath that you're going to die within 6 months. Dementia patients, you don't know how long they're going to live. My husband was healthy as a horse, except for his brain was deteriorating. In addition, you have to have mental capacity. You have to pass a mental capacity exam that proves that you have the ability to make a decision on your own and that you know what you're doing. Well, if you get to 6 months before you're going to die with Alzheimer's, you don't have mental capacity. So that's why it's impossible for anyone with dementia or any neurodegenerative disease to take advantage of our end-of-life act in California. There are 22 states in the United States that have end-of-life acts, but none of which will allow a dementia patient to use it. So I am not trying to go out there and advocate for change of laws, but I want people to know that there are options, like the one I chose. I didn't choose it, like the one John chose by going to Switzerland, and that you do have the right to choose how you want to die.